BioWare has a community problem. It's mostly their fault. I think they need to address it, and I have some ideas on how they can do that. Let's jump into it. So, in this video, I want to talk about this issue I think they have that I've seen kind of bubbling up. I want to talk about why the issue is happening, and then I want to talk about how I think it could affect Mass Effect and how they can try to help it not do that. So, to jump into the issue, there is a lot of animosity right now in the gaming community in general for BioWare and EA, as there always has been, at least for a long time. But for BioWare specifically, and a lot of it comes from within, from their own community. One thing I've learned, I got into Mass Effect back in 2021 when the Mass Effect Legendary Edition came out. I had been told for years and years and years to play, and it took until the ripe age of my mid 30s to ever actually do it. And I love it. It's probably my favorite game series ever at this point. I'm on my 20 plus playthrough of the whole series now. And one thing I noticed when I got into it was from a community point of view and a content creator point of view, there is a huge divide in the BioWare community. I come from the Division community. That's where I started my content creation. That's a game I spent literally thousands of hours playing. And when I played Mass Effect, it was an inspiration to me. I've become more of a general content creator since then, with a pretty heavy focus on Mass Effect. That's why now you look at my YouTube channel that you're on right now, and I have like 150 plus Mass Effect videos in just a few short years. One thing I've noticed while in this community is there's a general fandom of BioWare, I think, but there's two very clear groups, at least nowadays, of Dragon Age fans and Mass Effect fans. There's definitely crossover. There's people who are just as big of fans as one of the other, but I would say the majority are one or the other. I think that there's, and even back when I started this, I could tell, because that was in the lead up to Dragon Age of the Veilguard, there's, I don't know if I'd call it animosity, but there's definitely maybe a friendly rivalry between the like super fans of both franchises, right? And what's happened is we're now in a situation where Dragon Age may not get another game, where BioWare's future in general isn't great, where I assume on the direction of EA for the most part, have let go a ton of veteran devs and especially writing staff that a lot of fans are really attached to. There's a ton of like parasocial relationships because you talking about fans and people who worked for BioWare for 10, 15 plus years. And so I'm not even saying that in a negative way, but there's a lot of, deep feelings there. Writers who wrote certain characters that are like some people's favorite characters in any form of media ever, right? And when those people get let go, it makes people angry. When a game comes out that is really good, I thought Dragon Age of the Veilguard was amazing. It was my game of the year in 2024. When a game comes out that is technically very good, in reviews pretty well, but isn't received super well, even by its own community, and that puts the game's future in jeopardy, not just the game, but the franchise's future in jeopardy, that's going to cause anxiety. It's going to cause sadness. It's going to cause anger, right? Not to mention the devs who have been laid off or moved around and things like that. They're angry too, and they express those things as they should. That fires up the community even more. And that leads to what I've been noticing a lot in the last few weeks and months of especially in the Dragon Age part of the BioWare community, whether it's content creators, whether it's the the regular folks that interact on social media and YouTube and Twitch and stuff, there's a growing, like bubbling, toxic tar pit of anger and animosity for BioWare. Even though I think it should be focused more on EA than it already is, but EA as well. That is probably gonna not be great for BioWare in the future. Now, the future of BioWare is Mass Effect. We know that, right? We know that that's their next game. We know that they've, narrowed it down to basically being a one game studio, that they make one game at a time. And that kind of leaves us not knowing what the future is for a game like Dragon Age and that franchise. But they have to try to get people back on board, right? Dragon Age: The Veilguard had a very tumultuous development cycle. It basically, the game that came out was essentially the third iteration of that game, with two previous ideas being developed and then scrapped, leading eventually to the Veilguard. And I think that to a point, EA was willing to let that not be the most successful game in the world. I say that because BioWare still exists. Uh, on the other hand, their studio is like half the size it was during the development of Dragon Age. They've lost, most of their senior writing staff. They've lost a ton of frontline devs, either to moving them to other EA studios, or the people leaving on their own or being laid off. And all of that stuff has whipped people up into a kind of a frenzy. And I see it all the time. This isn't to, you know, point out anyone or call anyone out. I think people who are upset with this and who are, getting all riled up and stuff, I think it's reasonable. If Mass Effect was in the same situation, say the roles were reversed, I'd probably be doing the same stuff. But even just this week, I saw, a fairly, well-known commentator on the game who I really like personally. I like their stuff. Say basically, seeing BioWare, give up on Dragon Age and Star Wars, the Old Republic, which they jettisoned that franchise a couple years ago, to focus on Mass Effect is like watching someone, who is going to die from their choices. I'm paraphrasing. And while I get it, again, like if I was a Dragon Age fan, I'd be really frustrated seeing them do what they're doing. All the way from, the development and release of Veilguard to, essentially dropping, at least for now, any intentions of making more games in that franchise. I get that sentiment, even if I don't really agree with it. I think it's kind of crazy, actually, because I think Mass Effect could be a big comeback story for BioWare. We'll see. But that sentiment isn't just this one person. If anything, the way they portrayed it was pretty friendly, especially with non-content creator types of just regular folks who like games and like to talk about them. The sentiment, especially amongst those kind of people who are Dragon Age fans, is pretty rough right now. And it's not helped by the fact that a bunch of those former devs and even some current devs aren't super happy about how things are going. Just this week, I'm recording this on Friday, May 16th. EA announced that they're bringing people back into the office, and that it seems like it's a pretty convoluted plan that isn't going to be put a lot of pressure on people at first, but they're trying to mandate people coming back to the office. I don't know enough about game development to know if that's necessary, if that's better for things or not. I have my own opinions on that stuff for the industry I'm in, but that doesn't really matter in this conversation. But again, it just adds on to that kind of angst against EA, but especially BioWare, amongst the people I'm talking about. And I think that's going to cause them a lot of issues. Moving on to talk about how with Mass Effect, it's going to be an issue. Like if you think that these people are upset now, less than a year after a Dragon Age game came out, it's just imagine what it's going to be like for these people when we hopefully start getting Mass Effect updates, blog posts, teaser videos, trailers, interviews with IGN or whatever media that still exists in the next 3-4 years. It's only going to be worse as these people see that the move has really happened on from Dragon Age to a new franchise. It's added on to the whole concern of whether or not BioWare even, will keep existing. It's, lost a ton of developers over the last few years. I have the ever optimistic point of view of thinking that them still trying, that EA still giving them a chance to recover this is a good thing. They could just shut them down, right? And I don't want that. But that isn't going to make the people who are mad happy. Just because a Mass Effect game comes out in 3 or 4 years, if it does really well, you may see some people get excited, because the best chance for a new Dragon Age game is the next Mass Effect game doing amazing, right? And even if those people don't care about Mass Effect, they should, if they want more Dragon Age, be at least a little invested in Mass Effect doing well. But you can't expect them to do that. You can't expect them to not feel the things they're currently feeling. There's also the Andromeda issue. One of the things I've seen people talk about, these Dragon Age fans, is like, Mass Effect already had its bad game. Andromeda came out. Why are they making more Mass Effect? And I kind of get it, even though I don't agree. I can get that sentiment. If you're in their point of view, you can look back and be like, the Veilguard's better than Andromeda, which I would agree with. I think it definitely is. Why are they getting another chance at a game when we could take what the Veilguard did and try to improve it? Maybe the next game should be another Dragon Age game. Or maybe there should have at least been Dragon Age DLC or some kind of ongoing support, which it didn't get and it's not going to get. That is a done deal. So what I'm concerned about, and I hope that they have some kind of strategy, whether it's communication or whatever, just some goodwill moves to deal with as they start talking about Mass Effect. Mass Effect fans are going to be pumped. I'm going to be pumped. But there's going to be a very loud, even if it's a minority voice, a very loud voice from people with tens of thousands of, subscribers or followers on social media and YouTube and Twitch, and just regular folks who aren't involved in those things. It's going to be there and it's going to be noticeable. And I hope they have some way of trying to appease the people who are justifiably upset. How can they push back? I think involving the community, being as transparent as they can be, that is concerning to me. If that's a strategy that could work, because they really didn't communicate much with Dragon Age the Veilguard. They kind of did. They had some kind of interesting blogs about game development and how they develop various features and mechanics and stuff and like that in the game. They did. It was really strange. They kind of said nothing and said a lot. But the majority of their push was in the last few months. That was hampered by, obviously, they had a big deal with Game Informer to do a ton of press with them, and then Game Informer shut down halfway, a few months before the game came out, and all of the advertising stuff they did with them was just gone. So that was, probably just bad timing. But I think just involving community is a big deal. Speaking often and with significance, a big issue, even for Mass Effect fans like myself, is how often they've done in 7 days or blogs and stuff where they just reaffirm, yes, we are in pre-production on Mass Effect. Yes, we are still working on it. Yes, Mike Gamble and these other people are still here. Like, they just keep reaffirming the same information. It was, it came to a head in 2024's N7 Day celebration, where because they had just released Dragon Age the Veilguard, they literally had no teasers, no significant leaks or anything or trailers or anything like that for the next Mass Effect, which is understandable technically. But it's one of those things where, people like myself and others always get excited for N7 Day because at least for the last 4 years, there's been at least something interesting. And this time it was literally a 5-sentence blog. There was a Dragon Age the Veilguard crossover thing, which was kind of neat, but it was still very minimal. That was not a great sign for how things will move forward. I suspect this year, 2025 and 7-Day, 26 ongoing, because they're actually working on the game now, we'll get some kind of significant info. Maybe. We hope, right? And I think the biggest thing they can do is not make Veilguard's mistakes. The biggest one being development. Not, and this is more EA, I think, than BioWare. Don't trend chase. Don't try to make it a, online, cooperative live service shooter game, right? Like what they kind of tried to do with Dragon Age and in its earliest iteration. And, just the smoother and the more efficient the Mass Effect development is, even if it leads to a game that's, only quote unquote 20 hours or something, a shorter experience, a more compact experience. I would rather have a game that has a smooth development and comes out relatively quickly than one that has a bunch of drama, because I don't think the next Mass Effect will be afforded the patience that Dragon Age had with having multiple reboots of what the game is going to be and all of that. I don't think that's happening again. I suspect that would be very bad for BioWare. I don't think that's going to happen. So that's a big part. And then some of the weaknesses of the Veilguard. I love Dragon Age. I thought that game was really, really good. There were definitely some pretty glaring weaknesses. And I think the biggest ones have been addressed in a pretty brutal way with some of the layoffs and stuff that happened. And just because, people didn't like the writing, say, well, most of the veteran writers are gone, much to the detriment of the community's opinion of BioWare and EA. So you did that. Obviously, BioWare and EA believes that was a problem with Veilguard. I sure hope you have an answer, because you can't get rid of all those people. You can't make that drastic of a move to get rid of these like fan favorite writers who wrote some of people's favorite characters in both franchises, and then do something worse. So they cannot do that again, is what I would say. So to wrap this thing up, I understand why people are upset, but I think that animosity towards BioWare, from a pretty specific origin, group of people, that's very justified. As I've said repeatedly, I'm definitely not trying to throw shade here. That's got to be addressed in some capacity. You're not going to make everyone happy. You're not gonna please everyone. A lot of people who are mad about this stuff can't be turned. Their minds can't be changed. I think the best thing for them to do, and this sounds so, I don't know, dismissive or vague or whatever, is just make a good game and communicate early and often. That's not currently happening, but I hope as things kind of get together, as they start full production on Mass Effect, that's what happens. And for the love of all that's good, stop laying everyone off. But the last note I'll give on that, and we can kind of leave it on, is it's wild with all these layoffs that happen that we've seen. That EA reported their employment actually went up. They have 800 more developers this year than they did the previous year, even after all those layoffs. So that is a part of the story we never hear, that, yeah, they laid off 200 or 300 people, but say they also hired 500 people in the same time span. That doesn't help. That doesn't make anyone happy, especially the people who got laid off, the people who like the people who were laid off, and I assume the people who work with the people who were laid off. It doesn't, make them feel any better. But I think that it's interesting to consider that, maybe finances weren't the reason some of these people were laid off. Maybe there's a deeper explanation there, because in theory they're spending more money now than they were before, even though those people probably have lower salaries. That's a different video. So take all the information in. Let me know what you think in the comments, how you're feeling. If you're a Dragon Age fan, if you think I'm right about this stuff, or if you think I'm wrong, I'm happy to hear either opinion. Same if you're a Mass Effect fan. Let me know how you're feeling about this stuff, your perspective. And if you just stumble upon this video and like video games, let me know what you think as well. If you like this video, please subscribe to the channel. I cover Mass Effect, BioWare, gaming in general. Hit the like button so more people see the video. If you really want to support what I do, become a YouTube subscriber. You get a member. Become a YouTube member to get videos like this one a bit early and support what I'm doing. If you want to see the other content I'm making or other ways to support, check out the links down in the video description. That is all I have for this one. So until next time.